Hey everybody, it's Angie and welcome to Hot and Flashy. In today's Foundation Friday for over 50s, we are going to be reviewing Bite Beauty Changemaker Supercharged Micellar Foundation. This is $39 for 1 ounce and it comes in 32 different shades. Now, according to Bite, this is a clean, high-performance foundation with gentle micellar technology to mimic skin texture for a natural, flawless finish. It's a buildable, medium coverage foundation. It's clean, vegan, cruelty-free, and gluten-free. So we are going to put this one to the test today on more mature, less than perfect skin. I'm 57. I have combo skin, and I have my fair share of wrinkles and large pores, age spots, and discolorations that I want to hide. And I'm always looking for a foundation that makes my skin look better than it is. So that's what I'm looking for with this new foundation today. So I hope you'll join me on this multi-day wear test. I'm going to really put it through its paces. I've worn it 3 days already, so I have a pretty good opinion formed of it, and I've got it on today. So this comes in a plastic squeezy tube. It's a water base. It does have a couple of silicones. It has a couple of spreadability enhancers and emollients. It doesn't contain any sunscreen. It doesn't contain any SD alcohol, but it does contain fragrance, and it also contains linalool and limonene, which I know some people with sensitive skin, that can bother your skin a little bit. So just beware, just because it says clean doesn't mean that it doesn't have anything in it that can cause sensitivity. So anyway, the shade that I got this in is L40 light with a neutral undertone. When I put it on the first day, I thought it was actually a pretty good shade match for me. So let's get into the testing on it. So the first day that I tested it, I put on my usual sunscreen. I didn't use any primer because I like to test the foundation on its own with no helpers. The foundation has a whipped mousse-like texture. I applied it on one side of my face with a slightly damp beauty blender, and when I first started to apply it, I definitely noticed the flowery, perfumey fragrance. It spreads really easily over the skin and blends really well. It does stay damp for a while, so you do have time to work with it. Oh wow. Does that look really good, or does that look really good? And I applied it on the other side of my face with the BK Beauty 101 brush. I used a small pea-size amount on each side of my face, and it gave medium coverage that looked slightly sheerer on the sponge side and slightly fuller on the brush side. I thought the finish looked really nice and fairly skin-like, although I did think it was a little bit more luminous than I like in my more textured areas. Definitely still feels damp and tacky right now. It's only been on for about 5 minutes. I feel like it definitely is kind of coming off on my fingertips when I touch my face. I set it with the IT Cosmetics Bye Bye Pores HD powder to smooth the texture in my T-zone and try to set the makeup. With the rest of my makeup on, I thought it looked really nice and fairly skin-like. My only criticism of it at that point was that it had started settling into wrinkles already, and the areas I didn't set it still felt a little bit damp and not set. I was going off to the mall to do some shopping with my daughter, and so I wasn't home for the 5-hour check-in, but I did use my cell phone to shoot a little footage by a window at the mall, so let me bring that in for you now. Hey you guys, wanted to do a 4.5-hour check-in on the makeup here at the mall, but I came over by a window to look at it so that we could see it in natural light. So I think it looks pretty good. It's not too worn off anywhere. It seems to be wearing really well. I like the finish on it. It's not getting shiny or oily looking in my T-zone. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I'll just zoom in on it and take a look. I mean, I'm really impressed that it's still on my nose because a lot of things are worn off there at 4.5, 5 hours. I'm not sure if it's like creasing in here. My daughter kind of said it looked a little creasy. Maybe it's a little worn off here. Other than that, I think it looks good though. So I came back for a 10-hour check-in, and I was really impressed with the wear, especially on my nose. From a distance, I thought it looked pretty good still. It was a little bit more luminous between my eyebrows and accentuating a little bit of texture there. It was worn off on the bridge of my nose from where my sunglasses had sat. Up close though, I felt like my skin looked waxy in some areas, and the texture on my cheeks looked accentuated. It was gathered in my nasolabial folds and cracked and dry looking, and a little bit cakey looking around my mouth and upper lip area. So based on day one's experience, I felt like if I used maybe a sheer chemical sunscreen and maybe a hydrating primer, that I could get it to look a little bit better and wear a little bit better in these areas, even though it didn't need any improvement on my nose. So for day two, I used my La Roche-Posay Anthelios AOX Antioxidant Serum with Sunscreen SPF 50. I also used the IT Cosmetics Gripping Primer Base. I used my fingers to apply the foundation on one side, and I used the Tati Beauty Blendiful to apply it on the other. Here's the baby Blendiful, and here's the big one. This was my first time using the Blendiful, so I really didn't have any experience to know how it applied foundation yet. So I used less of the foundation on this day because I did feel like it looked a little bit cakey and a little bit waxy the day before. So I used about half as much. I got much sheerer coverage and much more of a natural look with it. It did still even out my skin tone well, but it didn't blend great with the fingers. There were a few streaks and it skipped over pores on the side of my nose. With the Blendiful, the coverage was slightly fuller than the finger side using the same amount. It blended the foundation pretty well. The finish looks much more luminous than the previous day because of the sunscreen showing through. Up close, the makeup wasn't sitting as well as it did the day before. Since it does stay damp for a while, I decided that I would try all cream products with it for the rest of my face. All three blended well and didn't remove the makeup, so that's good because sometimes when I put on a cream product over some foundations, it just removes the foundation. I also added a spritz of MAC Fix Plus. I thought it looked just okay. I didn't love it at sheer coverage. I didn't like the luminosity showing through from the sunscreen and the added luminosity from the Fix Plus. I just felt like it was really shiny, really accentuating my pores, really accentuating my texture. You know, sometimes that's just how it is with makeup. It doesn't go your way that day, so I just wasn't having a good day with it. I didn't think it looked good. I didn't know if it was the fingers, the Blendiful, the primer, or the sunscreen, or the combination of everything, or using less of it that was making it look just not great that day. But you know, I did come back for the 5-hour and the 10-hour check-in. It didn't improve, you know. It definitely started wearing off faster, so at the 5-hour check-in, it was much more worn off than the day before. It was looking patchy. It was gathered in the same places as the day before, around the nasal labial folds. It still looked dry in some areas and kind of waxy in others. Then at 10.5 hours, it really was a hot mess. It was worn off everywhere. I don't really have much to add. All the same bad stuff from earlier was going on. So I think I'm going to chalk day 2 up to just kind of a fail. So then for day 3, I had to figure out if it was the primer or the sunscreen that made it so wonky the day before. So I went back to using my favorite sunscreens that had worked so well with it on the first day, and then I put the IT Cosmetics Gripping Primer on half of my face, and on the other half of my face I used the YSL Blurring Primer. So Bite also came out with a couple of primers and a setting powder, neither of which I purchased for this review, but I did check the ingredients on the Bite Hydrating Primer just to try to match the ingredients to their primer with something that I could use. So that's why I went with the YSL Blurring Primer, because the Bite Primer has some oils in it and it's also got some silicones, and so that's kind of what this is. It's a silicone and oil mix. So I use the YSL Blurring Primer on this side of my face. I use the IT Gripping Primer on this side of my face, and that way I would be able to tell if it was the gripping primer that had made the makeup wear off faster, or if it was the sunscreen or one of the application methods. And then I went ahead and used a slightly damp blending sponge for the whole face, and the makeup went on much better. This time much more like it had on the first day, and I used about the same amount as the first day, maybe a little bit less, but definitely I wanted that medium coverage, so I got the medium coverage out of it. I did come back for a 5 and 10 hour check-in, but the day went pretty much identically to the first day I had worn it. You know, the wear was good, especially on my nose. Again, it did gather in my wrinkles again. It did make my upper lip area look creased and older. It did gather in my nasal labial folds and look a little cracked and mottled in there again. It looked a bit more like makeup sitting on the surface and a bit waxy up close again. So the primers didn't really seem to make a difference. versus the day that I wore it with no primer, but they definitely didn't cause it to totally fail like the day before. So I'm going to say that this foundation just does not do well with that particular chemical sunscreen. All right, so today's day 4. I didn't use any primer today because I was like, it didn't really make any difference, so why wear the primer? Today I applied it with my BK Beauty 101 brush and it went on really well with that. So we still have a few tests to do on this. We have the different lighting tests, so let me bring that in now. I shot that earlier today. All right, let's look at the Bite foundation in the overhead yellowy kitchen light. I think from a distance it's a nice looking foundation. I don't think it looks especially heavy or cakey. It's not as luminous in here as it is in front of the studio lights. All right, here's the Bite in front of natural window light. It's a little bit more luminous than in the kitchen light. I don't think it is doing anything extraordinary to smooth out my texture or to smooth out my pores. It does look a little bit makeup-y to me sitting on the surface. It's not 100% like natural skin-like looking, and they all looked okay from a distance and not so great up close. All right, and the last 2 tests we have to do are the phone transfer test. So there's my nice sparkly clean phone glass. So that's a fail. That's a pretty big makeup print right on the phone glass. All right, and then the last test is the selfie test, one with a flash, one without a flash. So let me do the without a flash first. That actually looks pretty nice in the selfie. I mean, it's not like erasing my texture or anything, but it's not bad. I don't mind it. And let me do the flash photo now. Got to turn on my flash, got to turn off the lights. Hold on a sec. My gosh, that is some evil under eye powder flashback. I'm not getting any flashback from the foundation, but it just looks waxy and really shiny and a little weird to me. Like, I don't love how it looks in the picture. All right, so let's go ahead and do the pros and cons on this one. On the pro side are that it is long wearing on its own without the help of even a primer. I especially liked it that it wore long on my nose. That was awesome. I think the finish is pretty. It's kind of semi-luminous. It's not overly shiny so that it super accentuates pores and texture, but it's not trying to be matte either. So if you do have a lot of texture on your skin, you might not like the finish, but a little bit of setting powder does help it to mattify everything down selectively. But then the little bit of glow that it gives you definitely looks a little bit more youthful on the rest of your face. It was easy to apply with a brush and a sponge. It was buildable up to medium coverage, and it was comfortable and lightweight to wear. On the con side are that it settled right into my wrinkles within a couple of minutes of it being on, that it doesn't really seem to dry back and set very quickly, which gives it a chance to get marked up either when you touch your face or gives it a chance to slide around a little bit. So I think it definitely benefits from some setting powder, but that is not going to keep it from sliding around all day. It does eventually kind of gather in the nasolabial folds and get into your wrinkles no matter what. It definitely was not the most smoothing foundation that I've worn. It didn't make my texture look the worst, but it didn't make it look improved at all. It just kind of showed it the way it is, which for me is like too much, don't like it, want something to minimize that, and it didn't really minimize texture. The fragrance in it I found a little bit bothersome, but just that they're going like for super clean beauty, I was surprised that they had the fragrance in there. And the last con is that it can look a little bit waxy, a little bit cakey, while it's doing that settling business. So this one for me is a real mixed bag. Like, I kind of liked it when I first applied it, but then as it wore through the day, it just didn't look great, and it didn't seem to make a difference whether I added setting powder, whether I added setting spray, whether I used a primer or not. It just wanted to be what it wanted to be. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It's going to be like in the middle of the road, like a decent foundation, but not anything that I can really wholeheartedly recommend to people who are older, especially if you have wrinkles, because it settles right into your wrinkles, and that tends to be a real deal breaker for me. So anyway, that is my full review on the new Bite Beauty Changemaker Supercharged Micellar Foundation. I hope you found it helpful and informative. If you did, go ahead and give the video a like. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. And as always, I thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your watching. So have a great day, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.